Hi, my name is Alyssa Manzi, and I'm going to be talking to you about verbal abuse. Now, what is verbal abuse? Verbal abuse is the act of forcefully criticizing, insulting, or denouncing another person. Now, why is this important? The reason you should care is because verbal abuse can have a long-lasting effect on your mental and physical health. It can lead to chronic pain, depression, or anxiety. There are certain kinds of emotional abuse, one being verbal abuse, yelling at you, insulting you, or swearing at you. Rejection, constantly rejecting your thoughts, ideas, and opinions. Gaslighting, making sure you doubt your own feelings and thoughts, and even your sanity by manipulating the truth. Now, what are the effects of verbal abuse on children? Children may develop a low self-esteem, self-image perception, or worldview. Children often act out in a negative and aggressive way received from their parents. As they get older, they may turn to alcohol and illegal substances to dull the emotional pain associated with their personal abuse. Sadly, for some children, the pain is too much and they turn to self-mutilation to dull their emotional scars and pain. How does verbal abuse affect elders in a nursing home? Verbal abuse can be devastating to patients and cause long-lasting emotional and psychological damage, especially if a patient is suffering from dementia or other cognitive diseases. These attacks can be even harder to understand. When patients first enter a nursing home, they often feel more emotionally vulnerable, and abuse by the staff makes this situation worse. Extreme emotional distress can eventually lead to health problems, as the stress can weaken the immune system and make them feel more vulnerable to infection. Teenagers who have been verbally abused versus teens who have not. There was a research study done between teens who have been verbally abused and teens who have not, and both groups were put together, like same age, same family structure, same everything pretty much. And they rated themselves for aggression, both physical and verbal, and they gave their perceptions of physical and verbal aggression between their parents and between their parents and themselves. Substance abuse, runaway behavior, and elements of teenage culture such as movies, music, and videos were also compared between the two groups. The group of teens that were labeled the offenders reported an extreme use of verbal abuse in their families that did not exist for the non-offenders. The teens in the offender group were much more physically aggressive compared to their parents and to the teens and parents in the non-offender group. So basically, overall, verbal abuse is what gets started. Like, that's the beginning of it. Like, they could also be abused physically, but they are for sure being abused verbally. In some cases, children are only abused verbally sometimes, and verbal abuse just hasn't been grouped within like physical abuse and so forth. When verbal abuse is constant and severe, it creates a risk of PTSD. Children who are a target of frequent verbal mistreatment exhibit higher rates of physical aggression, delinquency, and social problems than other children. Many studies tie the physical and sexual abuse to lasting effects on the brain and behavior, but emotional mistreatment has not received the same treatment. It isn't looked at as an actual abuse, even though it is. Like, it doesn't get treated the same way. Like, if someone at a school were to go to their teacher and say, my parents said this to me last night and it made me feel this way. Some people would just go, okay, go talk to a counselor. But in my experience, school counselors don't really help out as much. And that was just a high school talking. So, I mean, there is a hotline for verbal abuse. But personally, I would go and try to talk to someone. Not someone who has verbally abused you, but someone in your family who could understand in a way. So, that's all.